Hello and welcome! In this tutorial, we'll walk you through how to create a surgical splint using the On3D software. We're working with a patient whose surgical planning has already been completed. Before we dive into the splint fabrication process in On3D, let's briefly go over how surgical splints are created. Once the surgical plan is finalized through On3D's surgical module, we generate an intermediate splint between the repositioned maxilla and the preoperative mandible. This splint is exported as an STL file and then 3D printed. Here's the actual intermediate splint used for a patient. The surgery proceeds with mandibular repositioning, using a final bite as the guide. After that, a final splint is created for the postoperative upper and lower jaw relationship. This is the final splint used during the operation. Let's go ahead and start the fabrication process in On3D. Click on the Appliance tab in the top menu and select Surgical Splint. By default, the Select Type option is set to Intermediate, since only the maxillary surgery has been completed at this stage. Clicking on Final would simulate the mandibular surgery according to the final maxillary position. Let's create the intermediate splint. Simply go through Step 1 to Step 4 in order. First, click on Hinge Opening. After maxillary repositioning, if the upper arch interferes with the lower teeth, the mandible undergoes auto-rotation around a hinge axis that connects the medial points of both condyles. You can estimate how much the mandible moves by referring to the lower 1 MP values in the upper right corner. It shows the changes in x, y, and z coordinates, as well as the absolute linear distance. This helps you assess how much the mandible will move. It's important that surgeons are aware of this value, as it influences how the maxilla should be positioned during bimaxillary surgery. Click Splint Base to define the maxillary base area. Click Create Maxilla Base, and you'll see a guideline appear along the occlusal surface of the maxillary scan. To zoom in and get a closer view while adjusting the line, either right-click and drag your mouse, or scroll up with your mouse wheel. Reshape the baseline by dragging the white points along the line. Clicking on the line will add new points. To delete a point, hover over it until it turns into a green circle, then press Delete on your keyboard. If the splint requires wiring holes for intermaxillary fixation during surgery, make the buccal side slightly wider. If no wiring hole is needed, you can simply follow the orthodontic arch wire path. On the lingual side, it's better to extend the area to ensure enough thickness and reduce the risk of fractures. In this tutorial, we'll create a splint with wiring holes, so we'll make the buccal side slightly wider than the arch wire area. Once the outline is set, click Done. Next, click Create Mandible Base to define the mandibular base area. Repeat the same process to outline the region. Then click Done. This creates bases that extend 10 millimeters above and below each occlusal plane, for a total height of 20 millimeters. Now click Combine Splint Base to merge the upper and lower bases into a single model. Once combined, the splint base becomes transparent. Click Trim Splint Base to adjust the height and shape of the splint. Define the trimming line by clicking along the splint base. Each click places a green point, and connecting them forms the trimming path. Try to keep the trimming line as smooth and straight as possible by placing the points in a consistent direction. Rotate the scan as needed while tracing the path. To close the loop, finish at your starting point. To add a new point, click on the line. To delete, hover over a point and press Delete. Click Done to trim the upper section. Repeat the same process by clicking Trim Splint Base again to define the lower trimming line. Once finished, click Done to remove the lower part of the base. When trimming, there's no need to extend coverage to the very last molar or wisdom teeth, unless clinically necessary. Just make sure the splint covers enough tooth surface for retention without going beyond the arch wire area. Click Dentition Impression to imprint the teeth into the splint. You can adjust the dentition offset value to control the clearance between the splint and teeth. We recommend using 0.115 mm for optimal fit. Click Execute to apply the impression. Once complete, click Done. If wiring holes are needed, click Wiring Hole. Set the hole diameter, then click Hole Positioning. Click anywhere on the splint surface to place a red dot where the hole will be created. To reposition a dot, hover until it turns yellow, then drag it. To remove a hole, press Delete while the dot is yellow. Click Apply Hole to finalize the holes. And then Done to complete the step. Adding wiring holes is optional and based on the surgeon's preference. The intermediate splint is now complete. To export the STL file for 3D printing, go to the bottom and click Export Surgical Splint File. Check both agreement boxes in the pop-up window, then click Export Splint. The system will use the payment method registered when you purchased or subscribed on 3D. Now let's create the final splint. Go back to the Select Type panel and choose Final. Since both jaws have already been repositioned, we'll skip the hinge opening step and go straight to splint base. The splint base boundaries from the intermediate step are still present. You can keep them as is, but if you plan to add wiring holes, we recommend widening the base on both the buccal and lingual sides to strengthen the final splint. Update both upper and lower base areas as needed, then click Combine Splint Base. Once combined, proceed to the trimming step. In final occlusion, the upper and lower teeth tend to be closely aligned, making the splint thinner. To avoid a fragile splint, make sure to raise the trimming line up to the cervical areas on the maxillary lingual side. Once trimming is complete, click Done. Next, click Dentition Impression, and then Execute to engrave the teeth. You may see a few holes between tightly contacting teeth. This happens where resin doesn't fully fill in. Click Done when you're finished. Finally, click Wiring Hole to add holes for intermaxillary fixation. Place them wherever the surgeon prefers. Then click Apply Hole and Done to complete the final splint. Just like before, click Export Surgical Splint File, agree to the terms, and then click Export Splint to download the STL file. Once both the intermediate and final splints are exported, simply 3D print them and finalize any lab work. That wraps up our tutorial on how to fabricate surgical splints using On3D. Thank you for watching.